Hi everyone, my name is Brian Sweeney and I'm one of the consultants at the Educator Collaborative. I'm going to be speaking to you about journalism, the Common Core, writing, building a community within your classroom, all of these things. Before I start though, I just want to say a little bit about myself and just thank Chris Lehman for this whole day. I think it probably looks pretty easy what's going on here. It's just people sitting in their houses, putting on a video, opening their computer screen and having a Google Hangout. But hi everyone. If hold on one second, I got to fix something. Sorry, one thing I should say is I am my own tech support, so when things go wrong here, I have to fix them. So I've been helping kind of some of the other people go, and now I have to help myself. So my other setup over there was just going, and I fixed it. So what I was saying is, this all may look easy, but the amount of work that Chris put into this is incredible, and I've learned so much, not from the actual videos, which when I get to sit down and watch all of them, I'm sure I'll learn a ton from that. But I've learned so much just about the process of creating this massive day. So I want to thank him for that. I'm a high school teacher right now. I used to be a middle school ELA teacher and a literacy coach, and right now I just teach a whole bunch of high school students in Queens, New York. And one of the things I do is I run the student newspaper, and I have some journalism classes. And I wish I had had the experiences I've had as a high school teacher with the newspaper before I started teaching middle school, because it would have made my teaching there so much better. And what I would like to talk to you about is how to kind of not just have a journalism class, but how to weave the ideas of a journalism class into your own class, your own literacy class. Now, we said this is going to fit for grades 6 through 12, but I think you could really, incorporate these ideas. You just work them down the ladder and adjust as you see fit. But the idea is, I think that, I'm going to move to my presentation here. I think that with journalism, you can do something with writing that we maybe aren't used to doing as things are currently set up. So we're going to talk about this topic. You can write hashtag the EdCollab Gathering and then hashtag 10 to ask any questions you may have or share any comments. And as again, I'm my own tech support, so I'll be monitoring that and seeing if there's anything, and I'll jump in and ask questions, answer questions. So here we go. My general idea is that when we think of the Common Core and writing in the classroom in general, it's too broken up. I know the Common Core really has a bad rap these days, and there are various reasons why that is, and some I agree with and some I disagree with. But in terms of writing, I've never really had too much of a problem with it. I like that it simplifies things in a way by breaking it down into really 3 overall modes of writing: argumentative, informational, narrative. The problem I have is that in my experience, and maybe this isn't the same elsewhere, but I think it might be, over the past few years, argumentative has just been this huge chunk of writing that we focus on at the cost of the other 2. And it's kind of gone like this, where it's just like we do argumentative writing, and we kind of are trying out that informational thing, and we're just kicking narrative writing out altogether. And I think the point of that is this concerted effort that I don't agree with on the part of those making the Common Core, to say somehow that narrative writing just doesn't count as much as argumentative or informational. It's just not as serious or important, and we were doing too much creative things in the younger grades, and we got to stop doing that. And I think that that's really a false setup there. It doesn't make much sense to do that. The result is, though, we just kind of focus so much on argumentative writing that we leave aside these other 2. And when we do, we treat them as separate chunks, as things that are to be taught completely independently. What I like about the idea of bringing journalism into your classroom is that it brings them all together. My proposal is that if you don't already have some kind of unit involving newspaper writing, you make one and you try it out. Turn your class into a newsroom. Publish student writing online. And the idea is when you do that, when you have them creating a real newspaper, a real online publication, they're going to be doing the 3 types of writing all at once. They're going to be writing informational pieces by reporting on the news. They're going to be arguing things if you have an opinion section, which you should. And through feature writing, they're going to be telling the stories of the people at your school. And they're going to use narrative techniques to do that. And the idea is not that we blend these 3 forms of writing together so that they're indistinguishable from one another for students. The idea is that we teach them how to select which one is most appropriate based upon the purpose of what they're writing at that time. And we do that best in a newsroom unit by having all 3 available all at once. If a student wants to write something that's reporting the news, they have to decide, is this a news report? Or are they coming up with something that's a little bit more of a feature story that requires narrative techniques? Or are they writing the news report in such a biased fashion that they can't really call it a news report anymore and they have to write an opinion piece? Then they can switch gears and sell it as an op-ed. So to me, this is incredibly powerful because it teaches them not only how to write different things, but it teaches them how to select the most appropriate forms of writing. So what I'm going to do for the next few minutes is go through how to set this up in your classroom. I'm not going to go too much into the specifics of, say, how to teach news article structure or feature article structure or op-ed structure. I'll point more towards how you can kind of bring these overall types of writing into your rooms and the benefits of it. Because I think the bigger goal for us today is not necessarily to learn how to write a news article. It's fairly simple. It's to see why this can be so helpful. So the thing to me about informational writing when it's done in the Common Core is it's just kind of like eating your vegetables. Like, we've got to make kids do research, and we'll try and find interesting things for them to research, but ultimately what they're going to write is a report. And there's just nothing that's all too interesting about that. News writing to me is more interesting. It's not going to sound that way right off the bat. You're not going to say, hey kids, guess what? We're cutting out those research reports. Aren't you all excited? Because now we're going to write news articles. They really won't see the difference. But it can be sold better. And I'll tell you how I do it. The way I really get my kids into writing news articles and caring about them is by adding competition, which is really what newspapers are all about in a lot of ways. And I propose to students a philosophical debate right at the beginning of any journalistic unit. And I ask them about the news. What should the news be? What should a journalist do? Is it the job of a journalist to find stories that people want to hear about, that people will be interested in? Or is it the job of the journalist to find stories that people need to hear about, that the world needs to hear about, that people need to be educated on? The former, finding want-to-know stories, is exciting, but dangerous, because we might obscure important stories. The latter, finding need-to-know stories, is hard, because sometimes it's not too easy to get people interested in things that are kind of boring. If we're going to compare the specifics of what's going on with healthcare law to what Brad and Angelina are doing, Brad and Angelina are going to win out. So I let students choose. I kind of give them an example where this kind of debate is in play. I love showing them Time magazine covers. Time magazine has 4 editions across the world. One is the US, Europe, Asia, South Pacific, and sometimes you'll see there's great variation in the covers that they choose to show in each region. And a lot of times what happens is the American version is entirely different from the other three. So this is from October 2011, and you see this is really the need to know model on the other countries' covers. This is in the middle of the financial crisis that is crippling the world, and they have this big story, why Germany can't save the world. And it's all about, finance, economics, global important issues. In the very same week, this is still going on in America, but the American version of Time, the editors of the American version decided, nah, we don't want that story. We want Why Mom Liked You Best, the science of favoritism. We want these three kids here who are so cute, and these pieces of cake which look so good. And you really see this philosophical debate going on right here. They're saying to us, well, in America, we want to read about things that matter to us. Favoritism and moms and cake. And in the rest of the world, Time magazine believes at least, people are more mature and capable of reading about important things. Now, what I say to the kids, this isn't as simple as it may seem, because if you don't give people what they want, they might not buy it. And then your newspaper dies. But if you always give them something that's really kind of shallow and superficial, then what have you done to your country? What have you done to your community by ignoring important things? So how do we set up this kind of, debate within our classroom and make it drive their interest in writing news reports? Well, what I do is I have them write stories about the school based upon this philosophy. I break them into teams. Some students write need-to-know stories about the school community. They'll write about grading policies. They'll write about things that are happening in the school, new bell schedules, new teachers that are arriving, new things going on because of the Board of Education or the Department of Education or the superintendent or whatever. And some students write stories that are just what all the students want to read. Stories about, in high school, dating and social media and, the restaurants that everyone goes to and all of these kind of juicier topics. And what I have them do is publish it online. And because we create our website gives us statistics of which articles get the bigger audience. And they compete. They compete as to how to get people to read their articles. And this is the kind of results after a few years of doing this. So far, it seems kind of split. Our number one article is an opinion piece on dating. But right now, our number two article is this beautiful obituary about a assistant principal who passed away earlier this year. This is an opinion piece on the dress code at the school, which is very kind of want to know, but it's important too. This is a feature article on dating life at our high school. This is a story about an assistant principal leaving and getting a new job as a principal at another high school in New York City. And this down here is a story about how our entire schedule changed one year, and students were expected to stay in school for different amounts of time, which to me is a very need-to-know article. What I love about this is, one, the kids want to sell their writing. They want to figure out ways to get people to read their writing, and they love the competition. But two, it shows them that their writing doesn't die. Too often we kind of have this charade. I know it's good and it's important, but we have this charade where we say we're going to publish our literary essays, we're going to publish these things, and we have a day where everyone reads their work out loud, but in the end it still kind of just goes into a folder somewhere where it gets buried. And we're kind of pretending to publish for real. But we don't have to do that anymore. We can publish online for real, and we can get people to read it for real. And we can show them that even after the piece is due, people will still read and talk about it. These articles were written during the last school year. One didn't have this many views early on, but it became a bigger story recently because this principal, who once was our assistant principal, she kind of annoyed Nicki Minaj. Nicki Minaj went to LaGuardia High School and wanted to go speak there. and the new principal denied her request to speak there. And Nicki Minaj tweeted about it, and it became this kind of controversy. And now when people, all over the country are searching Google to find out what happened and who this principal is who denied Nicki Minaj, they're finding our article. And it shot from having like 100 views to 1,500 views over the past 2 weeks. The kid who wrote that last year is now not just, an author who had his work published. He's an author whose work is being read by people far beyond our classroom. So this, to me, is how we make informational writing matter. We get people to find stories about the school community and report on them and sell them, figure out ways to get an audience. And when we do that, we're doing two things. We're teaching our writers that their writing matters, but we're also teaching them to engage in something that's really important in this conversation about what's going on in the world, or at least in their world. And I don't think it matters what school you're at. People like to read things about their community. Even if they don't like reading about, the real news and like the New York Times, they like reading reports about their friends, or if they're on a team and they play sports and there's an article on their playoff games, like they like to do it. If there's an opinion piece on, a school policy that they don't like, people read. So that's another benefit, is it gets everyone reading. So that's informational writing. Set it up so that you have some students in your newsroom who are reporters reporting on what happened from this need-to-know, want-to-know perspective. When we move beyond informational writing, we go to this other form, which is feature writing. Feature writing, it's like writing a news article. So if a news article is just kind of responding to something that happened, in the case of the previous slides, an assistant principal being promoted to principal elsewhere, a former assistant principal passing away, a bell schedule being changed. A feature article kind of looks not so much with the what happened yesterday perspective, but with the let's look in depth at something that's important. So there are a number of ways you can write a feature article, but all of them differ from news articles in that they're kind of more detailed and layered. News article wants to report information on what happened and inform you. Feature article wants to bring you in. And even though it's still reporting information, it's narrative in its nature. Really good feature articles are narrative. And this, to me, is the most important thing, because we can get that narration, that narrative writing back into schools and give it an important place if we bring feature writing in. So I'm going to give you some examples of what these kinds of articles look like, so that when you set up your newsroom, you want to have students writing different things. Some are writing those news articles, some are writing feature articles. You will never run out of feature topics to write in a school, because every single student, every single community member there's always something interesting that can be featured about them. And when old students graduate, there's a whole new group that comes in with their own stories. It will never happen. You will never not have features to write. So that's one way you can do it, is you can write profiles of people and tell their story. Another thing you can do is write evergreen stories. Evergreen features are features that are interesting no matter what's going on in the news. So let's say you want to do a feature on how students are using Facebook at home and how much they use it as opposed to how much they do their homework. Well, that's going to be relevant at any time during the year. It doesn't matter what's going on in the news at the time. So you can always kind of set up students to write stories about interesting topics that aren't necessarily timely, and tell those stories. The other thing you can do is have them work on features that involve the history of the school. It's our 30th anniversary this year, so we're going to have a big feature article that connects the first graduating class to the current freshman class and asks what was it like to be a freshman in 1984 and compares it with what it's like to be a freshman in 2014. And our writer is telling the stories of both freshmen and the freshmen from 30 years ago. You can do all sorts of things like that. How's the building changed over the years? How have the teachers changed? How's the student body changed? So these are just ways that you can come up with these narrative-driven articles and make them similarly relevant to the news articles. I continue on with the need to know, want to know thing, even in features. So I have some students write need to know features for the need to know team, and they might write about, how academic policies have changed over the years. The want to know people might write a feature on like the latest app that everybody is going crazy over. So you can still maintain that separation there. Here's an example of a great feature that our writer wrote last year, and they designed this whole layout. This is from our print edition. And I want you to just get a sense of how the narrative is working here. This is how she opens her article. For Townsend Harris, February 4th was chaotic. As the first day of the spring 2014 semester, students were searching the building for their new classes, comparing programs with their friends, and flocking to the guidance office to ask for changes. In the midst of the mayhem, English and health teacher Georgette Wallace gathered her students in the gym to inform them of some personal news. Just a few weeks prior, she'd been diagnosed with breast cancer. The news, which shocked Miss Wallace's students, came only a few days after her surgery, though the experience was still recent and many might decide to keep their cancer experience a private matter. Miss Wallace felt that it was important to share her story. I told my students before almost anyone because I didn't want them to overhear rumors, she explained. Story. We have a teacher who really wanted to share what was going on with a very serious topic with her life because she's a teacher and she wanted to educate them about this very serious disease. The writing there, though, you see, is entirely narrative. I mean, this is a student using the techniques of creative writing to pull you into this article. And it sets the scene, it brings you in, and it's just great. She has to be able to have those skills to write this article. And so to me, it just bothers me so much that we push narrative writing aside as this inherently kind of unserious mode of writing compared to argument, when this is in no way unserious or unimportant. There's this notion that creative writing is just kind of like for personal development and not for real learning. Well, it's just not true. This is very educational. So I love features because they bring narrative writing back, and they can have it be going on in your classroom at the same time as that informational writing is going on. Here's another article one of our students wrote where she profiled various students who had immigrated to America. And there's got to be students like this in every school in America. And you may not know it. You may not know their story. But she decided, she was going to tell their stories. Same thing. This opening line is very narrative. In a heated debate about the DREAM Act in his U.S. government class, a student described his own experiences as an immigrant, to which the class replied in a surprised clamor, "You're an immigrant?" She then goes on to talk about how so many students at our school are immigrants, and she tells us about their lives and their stories of coming here. It's a great piece. And of course kids want to read it. Even if this is more of like a serious topic, they want to read about their friends' stories. Teachers want to read about this too. This is good for teachers to know. It's good for everyone to know. So that's feature writing. So again, with my vision of like this newspaper unit going on in your classroom, it's not you teaching just one type of writing. It's you opening up the classroom to 3 types of writing going on at the same time. You have your 2 teams, the need to know team and the want to know team. And within those 2 teams, you have different writers writing different pieces. Some are writing informational pieces on news stories. Some are writing more narrative/informational pieces on feature stories. And then some are writing arguments. So we still get our arguments in there, but these are arguments that aren't just on some stupid prompt they got from Pearson or McGraw-Hill. This is an argument about something going on in their community that other people are going to read and be interested in. Op-eds in newspapers drive conversation. And even if students don't read op-eds in the New York Times, like I said before, they will read op-eds in their school newspaper or on a website that you create for your class. And there are so many ways you can do this. It's not just writing an essay and having one student write it. You can have the entire news team, so your need to know team or your want to know team, write a group editorial. So the idea of an editorial is it's an opinion piece that is co-authored or at least authored after much consultation with a group of people, signed. There's no name attached to it, and expresses the opinion of the editorial board. What we can do is have all of the want-to-know students pick a topic that's going on in the school that's inherently kind of, interesting and juicy, and form an opinion on it. Have them sit there and debate that opinion until they can come to a consensus, and then assign a few people to work together to write that piece. My editors do this all the time, and it's amazing to watch. They pick important issues, they really debate what's going on, they come together and they write these amazing editorials where they argue for a specific position. What you can do there is have a group of kids be writing together, learning from each other, and working on this piece that will matter, that they care about. But you can also have individuals writing opinions. So just as you have an editorial page, you have an op-ed page where students individually propose topics that they want to argue about in their newspaper. And they put their name out there, they attach their name to the article, and they argue for something. There's a third type of opinion writing you can do, though, and you can have them write letters to the editor. So maybe the other class at your school is also doing a journalism unit, and they have a website where they're publishing their articles. Maybe a student has a strong opinion about one of the articles that was published. They can write opinion pieces to be published in response to those articles. And that creates great conversation between classes, between students, and others can join in. Now, you haven't just let an essay go out there to die. You've given it real life. So let me show you some examples. This is one of our editorials that I loved. 2 years ago, New York City decided that teachers couldn't grade their own Regents exams anymore. So they had to be taken away from the schools, shipped to Connecticut, scanned into computers, emailed to other schools in New York City, and then graded by teachers from other schools than your own. Problem was that the computer system didn't work, and the grading was just entirely messed up. And what ended up happening is we have students who were getting 5s on the English AP test, who were getting like 75s on the English Regents in New York State. And if you don't know anything about the English Regents, it's not nearly as challenging as an AP test. So we wrote this article on what happened, and nobody cared. They told us, stop complaining. If you got a 75, at least you passed. So our students wrote this editorial. Even worse is the fact that the system appears to have produced unreliable results. How can a student here earn a high mark on an AP test and not achieve mastery on a Regents? The fact that officials refuse to hear our appeals, likely because they believe we shouldn't be complaining with a 99% pass rate, is unacceptable. If a teacher misgraded an exam, refused to reconsider, and withheld the specifics of how she determined the scores, then DOE officials would do their best to fire her and would lament their inability to do so. How could high-stakes exams not be held to the same standard? We desire transparency and accountability from the DOE. I'm just still amazed that they wrote that. And I think maybe I should pause here and say I'm lucky because I'm at a school where, one, students are capable of writing that without me really telling them how. They figured this out largely on their own. But two, we don't censor them. And that's a huge problem with journalism at schools, is that principals and administrators are usually allowed to censor students, particularly if it's done during class time, that they write these for class. So you might say, I can't do a journalism unit where students are writing opinions about the school. My principal will go crazy. It's just going to create this feeding frenzy. Now, it doesn't have to be that they're writing things on such controversial issues. I mean, they could just write about how students shouldn't use Facebook so much or something, and you can guide them towards doing that if it's really going to be a problem at your school. But my argument for giving them freedom is you get writing like this as a result. And what is going to be better to hear for an administrator than our students are loving argumentative writing and they are writing brilliant essays? I mean, show them this. This is what they can do when you give them freedom. And this doesn't hurt the school to publish this. I mean, the DOE didn't care that we did this. They just laughed it off. They didn't even read it. So you'll have to deal with that issue of, is it going to be too much of a controversy to have students be writing about the school? But if you handle it well, it should produce benefits that administrators realize and shouldn't cause too much of a problem. Here's another amazing article our students wrote. This was in response to a case in Steubenville, Ohio, where boys were convicted of raping this 16-year-old girl. It's a terrible story, and I had two students who didn't like how the media was portraying it. And they wrote this article, and we published it on our website, but the Daily News, it won an award, and the Daily News republished it on their website. So this, to me, is an example of what I was saying before. Like, this is now not just this kind of charade publishing. This is real publishing. This is on the New York Daily News' website right now. You can see it. And it's a brilliant piece. This is just as good as any opinion piece on the Daily News' website right now. So the thing is, the other thing to sell to administrators, when you have students writing real stuff like this, the world is no longer so closed off. When they put it online, they can get it elsewhere. Real news organizations can pick it up. You can tweet it to someone, and they can retweet it, and it can go all over the place. And this is incredibly important for students to see. So that, to me, is the breakdown of how you want this news unit. You have three groups of students working at the same time. Some are writing news articles, some are writing feature articles, some are writing opinion pieces. You then have all three areas of writing being hit with the Common Core. You have information, you have opinion or argument, and you have narrative writing going on. Your job during this kind of newsroom workshop setup is to guide all three groups and have them switch. Some weeks they write news articles, some weeks they write feature articles, some weeks they write opinion articles. By the end, they've had their share of publishing numerous types of articles, and they really learn each. I just find it so much better than just treating everything as a completely separate unit. Like, now we're writing arguments, and now we're writing information, and now we're writing stories, because they're all three completely separate things. They're three important things, but they shouldn't be mutually exclusive from one another all the time. So that's the setup of the class. There are a few more things I really want to talk to you about that are really helpful once you have this going. And the first thing is copy editing procedures. So once students write articles, it doesn't mean that they should just be published online immediately. And it's really difficult work for you as the teacher to get all of these articles and, edit them for publication. If you're putting it on a website, people are going to see it, parents are going to see it, principals are going to see it, others are going to see it. It's got to look good. So it has to be proofread. Well, have the students do that. Teach them to copy edit, to make the articles publishable. And now what you're having is a completely different set of benefits going on. I have all the students use Google Drive so that they can share articles and comment upon them. And what we do is students sit down with one another and they talk about their articles. So one of our editors will sit down with, say, an opinion writer and discuss their different narrative choices, their different writing choices, their craft. And they'll make edits. So you have conferencing going on between students. Here's an example. Again, this is high school, so the topics are going to be more advanced, shall we say. than those of middle school or elementary school. This is an opinion piece on how you can have platonic relationships in high school. And here are my editors on the side just arguing and advising about the real specific language of this piece and how to make it as good as it can possibly be. So this person is saying that the headline is redundant and sorry. Down here, this person is saying that that point is a bit unrelated to the main point, and that's a problem since it's the second to last paragraph. It should reiterate the last point. I mean, these are students, because they have a stake in what gets published, really caring about the fines of writing. And I've never accomplished as much as a teacher than I have by just getting other students to really care about editing the writing of other students. The editors I have who know how to edit well have learned more about writing over the past few years than I think any student that I've had previously. This really does the job. But another thing you can do, rather than having these one-on-one conferences, is you can just edit an article as a whole class. So does a headline work? Is it worded as well as it should be? Does a lead, which means the opening paragraph of the article, so if it's a news article and it's a hard lead, it should kind of sum up the key news details that are in the article. Is it a good summary of the article that follows? You can discuss that. You can put it on a screen and really fine-tune the wording. The kicker, the last line of the piece, does it sum everything up in a creative and interesting way, or is it just kind of bland? I've done this before where I have us just sit with like one paragraph of writing and spend an entire period perfecting the wording. And this small attention to detail helps each individual student perfect their own writing. So copy editing is another thing you want to work into this unit so that you have a lot going on where students are paying attention to detail. The next big question that I want to go over is, well, it's easy enough for you to say that we can put it online. Well, how do we do that? I think just make a WordPress website. WordPress.com is simple, it's free, and it's easy to use. It's built to be intuitive. You can see the statistics of who've used your website with a WordPress account. You have features where students from other classes can comment upon your articles and engage in wider conversations about the topics of the articles. It's very simple, and I'll just show you a bit of what it looks like now. So I'm going to end the presentation and go over here. So let's see. I have another window open. All right. So here's WordPress.com. Create a website, enter your new site address, create. It's as simple as that. And when you're logged in, the interface looks like this. Here's your website. And it's not as easy to make it look like this. I mean, I had a lot of kids working on this, but it doesn't need to be like this. It can be very simple. To add a new article, you go up here, new post, and you'll get this interface. Give it a headline, paste in the article from a Google Drive. You can add categories like news, feature, opinion. Click publish, and it'll publish to your website. It's really that simple. And then all you have to do is share the links with your school community. There's no reason why it has to look too fancy, why it has to be something beautiful, but if you want that eventually, many of your students can do that. You don't even have to ask them. You can say, look, I want to have designers in the newsroom who work on the design of the online paper, or if they know how to create programs to make a print edition, you can use programs, have them design that, get it sent out, and actually print it. It doesn't have to be done as just a part of the extracurricular for the school. I think a big problem with how we conceive of journalism in schools is we just view it as this thing that just gets done elsewhere in a specified class or in an extracurricular. And it doesn't have to be that way. You can bring journalism into your class uh, without having to be an expert at it. It's all fairly straightforward and simple. So I'm just going to wrap up here with a few other things that you can do. If you have your class set up, you have your website, you've gotten kids to design it, they're writing all sorts of stuff, keep going. Have them make videos that go with the writing. And this teaches them how to kind of extract key details and visualize it in interesting ways. So, they might have a profile on the daily life of a teacher, and then they might have a video crew go and focus in on just one part of that routine that's written of in the article, and make just a little documentary that goes with the article. When you publish it online, you have the YouTube video embedded with the article. Students read the article, watch the video, see the connections between both, and now you're adding literacy into the actual writing that you're teaching. It doesn't have to be just video, though. You can get photographers to pick, one key thing to illustrate in the article with a key photograph. You can have illustrators draw things with opinion pieces. There are so many things that you can do that aren't just bells and whistles that make things look pretty, but they actually get students thinking more about the writing, and it builds their literacy skills in addition to their writing skills. The other thing you can do is teach them how to promote their work. There's no reason why students can't just real authors on social media sharing links to things that they've written. And frequently what happens in my classes when we have this need to know, want to know debate going on, you have students kind of gaming the system, but not really, because it's fair, by going on their Twitter account and just sharing links to their own side's articles. And the kids who are better at social media promotion are the ones who win. And so they'll put it on Facebook. They'll have some kids have like a Facebook group and they tag it there or pin it there is what they do, so that no matter what, it's always at the top and everyone who logs in sees it. They send it to families. So if it's a sports article, like all the parents of the kids on the sports team will read the article and share it with all their family members. And we get tons of hits. Our website, in the 3 years that I've been doing this, has had 60 to 100,000 views of articles, and it's an incredible number. So, to me, what I want to emphasize is just this isn't something that we should consider as like just another thing that students do. They can be journalists if they want. Writing about your community, making a newspaper, is hitting all the main things that we want them to be hitting, and it's making their writing matter. And if you can do that, you'll do so much more for them than just teaching them how to write a good argumentative essay in response to a prompt about some article that Pearson badly wrote or badly mangled from a real writer. So give it a chance. If you're interested in talking more with me, you can contact me through Twitter, through the Education Collaborative, the Educators Collaborative, and I hope you've enjoyed this. So thank you very much for watching, and thank you again to Chris for setting this all up. I'm going to stop the broadcast. Bye-bye.